Yeah, definitely. So there is something in the fiat financial world called the Trinity study. And so the Trinity study was done by a guy named Bill Bengen. And basically what he came up with was that if you have a 50% stock, 50% bond portfolio, and you withdraw 4% every single year, you will basically be able to have your portfolio live on for 30 plus years, and you won't run out of money. And so the 4% safe withdrawal rate is one of these like very standard numbers that people use for retirement planning. And if you're going to retirement plan for long periods of time, right? Obviously, if somebody retires at the age of 80, right, you probably maybe don't need a 30-year time horizon, in
Hmm.
which case you would use a higher withdrawal rate and so forth. But 4% is typically what people think of. When people are retiring much younger than I would say a normal retirement age, we should actually try to look at like between 3 and 3.5% just to make sure the money lasts for a really long time. But this is sort of like how I went into doing my retirement planning research for Bitcoin. Why I'm like giving you this backstory is that I just thought, okay, let's find out what's a safe withdrawal rate in Bitcoin. And so after doing like crazy amounts of math and calculations, like literally like so much, so many different things, and like running different portfolios and trying to figure this out of like what's the safe withdrawal rate, I finally had this haha moment of like, Bitcoin is not a compounding asset.
Mm.
Like it's a fixed asset. So you
Mm.
just divide it by a number and that's how much Bitcoin you can spend. It's like, it's so simple.
Yeah.
It changes retirement planning completely, right? So obviously if you live in this nice Bitcoin
Wow.
world where, I spend zero point 0.1 Bitcoin per year, right? Then okay, this is how much I need to retire, and so forth, and everything's great. We don't live in that world though yet, right? So
Hmm.
like there's still some financial planning that needs to happen to decide how much Bitcoin would be appropriate to withdraw and so forth, and how you would handle actually what happens in like from a financial planning perspective to make sure that you have enough runway to last the volatility, right? Because like let's say you're at the peak in 2021, right? And you're like, okay, I have enough to retire now, and I'm going to take my one Bitcoin out per year or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But then Bitcoin crashes, and now you're like, I can still only take out one Bitcoin per year, but now I can spend 85% less, right? It's a very different
Hmm.
picture. And so basically, while we're still living in this fiat world, what I actually think makes sense for people and what people aren't going to really want to do, but what they're going to have to do would be that you sell 5 years worth of Bitcoin, keep it in fiat so that you can actually
Mm.
literally retire whenever you hit that price target. So like if somebody's price target is 700,000 K
Wow.
for Bitcoin, I know I can retire. Then when we hit 700,000 K, okay, now I sell 5 years worth of expenses. That's going to be, I think, super difficult for people. It's like going to be
Oh
one of the
wow.
hardest things is going to be to actually pull the trigger on that kind of stuff. But the math actually says that that's what you're supposed to do.
Wow.
And so I found that all to be really interesting because it's like I'm sitting here at a spreadsheet like, oh, maybe it's a 10% withdrawal rate. It's like
Yeah.
it's not. It's like actually 2% or less depending on your lifespan. I mean,
Crazy.
obviously, like if you're 90 and if you want to plan to age 100, right, your withdrawal rate is going to look very different than somebody who's like, I'm 35 and going to retire. And all of the withdrawal rates I based off of like 100-year lifespan so that people can outlive their money. But again, right, if you live
Hmm.
to be 120, you actually run out of Bitcoin, and if you live to be 80, then you have significantly more Bitcoin left over. And so like getting that
Hmm.
actuarial assumption more like correct is actually going to be more meaningful in a Bitcoin world.
Wow. So I may have missed this, but is the 5-year thing to reduce the volatility of the 4-year cycle? Is that like getting over that hump?
Mhm.
Oh
Yeah,
wow.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Of
Yeah.
like, okay, if there are 4-year cycles in Bitcoin, then you would want to have at least 5 years worth of runway. And if you really wanted to be
Mm.
safe, you would actually do more like 8 years worth of spending. And you would have to like calculate an inflation rate in there too, obviously, to make sure that you were
Hmm.
keeping up with fiat inflation over that time. But yeah.